is the state of research on cannabis as a treatment option for pets?
The state of that research has been really moving quickly. When I first started seriously looking at cannabis as medicine for pets, probably about, I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 10 years ago, there was literally nothing. At this point, we have up-to-date studies as far as pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, toxicity studies. We have efficacy studies for osteoarthritis and seizures, and there are more and more research projects underway.
Well, that's exciting. I started researching this topic because of concerns about dogs consuming cannabis and experiencing toxic effects before I just started to think about some of the potential benefits. Why are dogs so susceptible to cannabis?
Well, for reasons that I'm not sure that anybody really fully understands, uh, it turns out that dogs have a greater concentration of CB1 receptors in their brainstem than do people, and for that matter, more than any other animal species that's been studied. So what that means functionally is that they are more susceptible to the intoxicating effects of THC on a pound per pound basis than say would be a human.
Well, I didn't know that it was the brainstem in particular, so it's not necessarily other areas of the brain.
No, it's not. As you would expect from the standpoint of the brainstem being affected, a lot of what we see are issues with balance, coordination, to a certain extent. Obviously cognition always comes with THC intoxication, but you see some very, very typical um, symptoms in dogs in particular that are intoxicated on THC. In fact, there's a name for that constellation of symptoms. We call it static ataxia. It's basically, if you've ever seen a dog that has had too much THC, you won't really forget it. They are clearly zoned out, and they will sort of adopt almost what you might consider like a sawhorse kind of stance, and they sort of will sway back and forth almost to the point of falling down, and frequently they'll catch themselves at the last minute and not fall over. But that's very very typical for THC intoxication in dogs.
Oh, that makes me sad just to think about the poor
It
creatures.
kind of is.
What about other pets? Do you ever encounter other pets in your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my practice these days is mostly dogs and cats, but I mean, we certainly see, um, you know, uh, there's been research into and evaluation of the use of medical cannabis in other species, particularly horses. Not an area that I deal a lot with, but there's been a lot of, looking into horses. There's also been some exploration into other species, birds, cattle, things of that nature. So any animal can, experience the effects of THC intoxication just like a person would. And frequently, as is the case with people, it is exceedingly rare for these effects to kind of cross the line into life threatening. It can happen, but it is very, very rare.
If you think your dog ate your stash, what should you do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's worth saying that every case of THC intoxication in an animal I've ever seen has almost exclusively been because the pet ate the owner's stash, or on rare occasion, once or twice, I've seen somebody with the best of intentions trying to use cannabis as medicine for their pets and not really understanding what they were doing and just giving too much. But to your question, if you feel like your pet, they got into your stash, or for whatever reason they may be experiencing those toxic effects, it is always a good idea to get in touch with a veterinarian. Just because these effects are rarely fatal does not mean these animals don't sometimes need supportive care. Um, Anybody who has ever had the experience of consuming too much edibles can tell you that that is not really a good time. and your pet may need a little bit of support through that process. Chances are they will be fine, but please, please always call a veterinarian and get some solid advice.
Great advice. So I have a friend who says his dog would pick out roaches from his ashtrays full of cigarette butts and selectively pull those out. Do you think some dogs might be susceptible to cannabis use disorder or liking it too much?
Dogs are weird, man. I mean, and it's not just cannabis. I mean, like the things that dogs want to eat are very, very strange. But yeah, I mean, you get dogs out there that will do that. I think a lot of people also know that for speaking in generalities, a lot of dogs really like beer. But you know what? Neither of those things are really good for your dog. Don't give your dog beer. Don't feed your dog roaches out of the ashtray. None of that stuff is approved by your veterinarian.
Gotcha. So, turning over to how cannabis might be a useful tool and
Yeah.
medicine, in humans, certainly certain types of cannabis can help with sleep, pain, anxiety, seizures. Do you see that pets benefit from cannabis in the same way as humans are purported to benefit?
Yeah, and I mentioned a few minutes ago that we do have some research now to show that cannabis will benefit animals for things like inflammation, osteoarthritis, seizures, that sort of thing. Clearly, there is a kind of a whole spectrum of other potential uses of cannabis as well that have not yet been fully studied in animals. That said, I can tell you just from clinical experience as a veterinarian who's been working with animals, and using cannabis as medicine, that I think all of the potential applications that you see in people, they correlate in animals. So anxiety, sleep, gastrointestinal disorders, all the kind of stuff that people might look at for themselves. There is frequently a corollary of how to use that for animals.
Is it ever recommended to give pets THC based treatments?
Yes, it absolutely is. I mean, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but cannabis is not, it's not a one-dimensional thing. I mean, to say that a person or an animal is using medical cannabis is a pretty broad thing, and that's a really big difference when we talk about, say, pharmaceuticals. Like if I say, oh, I put my patient on amoxicillin, you know exactly the active ingredient that that patient is on. You say that something's on cannabis, and it could be, I mean, sky's the limit from the standpoint of the spectrum of cannabinoids, terpenes, and what have you that that animal may have. Uh, and THC, without question, has benefits. Now, we were also just talking about how sensitive dogs can be to the intoxicating effects of THC. So we do have to be cautious of how these things are used. But I am a very, very big believer in the benefits of THC for animals. I'm also a very big believer in the entourage effect rather than focusing, say, on an isolate of CBD or THC or something to that effect. Even the research that we have in humans speaks very clearly, to the benefit of a more broad spectrum, product than say an isolate. And I think that's all very true when it comes to animals as well.
Sounds like some of the same discussion we had about pain in
Yeah.
my first podcast. So, what are the legal considerations people should understand regarding cannabis and pets?
So, yeah, that's a really great question. So, and I chuckle because those legal considerations are in flux as we speak. So right now, I think as most people know, hemp is if nothing else tacitly legal as a medical product in this country, and there are no shortage of hemp-related products that are marketed for animals, and those products could be anywhere from you know effectively CBD only to a more broad spectrum product. that has CBD and other cannabinoids and other terpenes and even THC up to 0.3%. On the other side of the coin, when we're talking about THC over 0.3%, so in other words, something that legally speaking would be described as marijuana, uh, it really varies from state to state. So some states like California, where we live, we have, medical and adult use recreational cannabis in this state, and the Department of Cannabis Control in the state of California right now is deciding on what the regulatory framework is going to look like as it pertains to sort of content and labeling of animal cannabis products. So again, that's going to vary from state to state. As I'm sure you're also very well aware, Congress right now is debating the concept of requiring any hemp product that is produced to have 0% THC in it. If that happens, it is going to turn the entire hemp industry on its head. And quite frankly, I don't know anybody in the business of medical cannabis that is happy about that. But that's politics. So, long story short, legality wise varies state by state. How much your veterinarian can discuss this with you varies state by state. So, it very much depends on where you live.
I can see people jumping on this and saying, "Oh, out in California, they're trying to get their pets high as well." So,
Ugh. Yeah, that kind of stuff makes me crazy. But yes, there is no such thing as recreational use cannabis for animals.
okay, that's good to know. Do you feel comfortable going to a dispensary to buy products for pets? Is that what you recommend that your patients do, or their
Well, that's
owners?
a great question. I mean, I myself feel very comfortable about it because I have the knowledge base to understand what I'm looking at, to read a certificate of analysis and really understand what everything means. Um, for a pet owner to go to a dispensary and go through that process, unless you happen to be somebody that is far more knowledgeable than the average person on the street, this is the kind of thing that you're going to need some guidance, because this is when accidental harm happens to pets, when people don't really understand exactly what they're giving or how much of it they're giving. And when we're talking about products in dispensaries, obviously there are very high THC products sold in dispensaries. Um, and, people need to understand that, when you calculate a dose for an animal, if you do your math wrong and you move a decimal point one place in the wrong direction, you're giving 10 times more than you think you are. And that is a disaster in the making. This is another reason why anybody who's thinking of using a cannabis product, particularly one from a dispensary, please get some guidance from a veterinary professional so you don't accidentally do harm.
Right, but how many veterinary professionals know about this and are willing to even talk about it?
That's a really great question. And I think, again, that comes back to partly this question of depends where you live. But that said, even here in California, you make an excellent point that a lot of veterinarians do not have the knowledge base to have that conversation. So, like many other things in life, it may take a little bit of due diligence on the pet owner's part to find somebody. I, as you may know, am a co-founder of a nonprofit called the Veterinary Cannabis Society. The Veterinary Cannabis Society is a group of veterinary and other industry professionals. And what our purpose in life is to educate consumers and educate the veterinary profession and advocate for laws that protect pets. So, if you go on to the Veterinary Cannabis Society website, which is vcs.pet, you can actually find a listing of veterinarians that are VCS members, and that's probably a good place to start if you really don't know where to look.
VCS.pet. That
Yes, sir.
sounds like a great place to visit and learn a little bit more. What are you working on now with respect to veterinary medicine and cannabis?
Oh my goodness, that is a question that we could talk about for hours. So I'm going to try and I'll sum it up for you. So, professionally speaking, where I sit is I am what I would describe as an integrative practice veterinarian, which means that I practice both Western medicine and alternative medicine, which is really kind of how I got into the cannabis route. And really, what I'm spending a lot of time looking at now is pet longevity. So, as a lot of people may know, the field of longevity science is just absolutely exploding with new research, with new funding, and much of the research that's being done looking into longevity for humans absolutely applies on the veterinary side. Now, some of that's, it's biohacking, it's peptides, it's fancy things to extend life. Some of it is also preventing illness and improving quality of life so patients can live longer. And cannabis plays a definitive role in that. I mean, if we can decrease an animal's level of pain or increase their mobility, if we can make their life better by working on anxiety or controlling seizures, that's a pet that is going to be able to live a longer, healthier life. So it all really ties in together.
Yeah, it's not so much about living longer, although it is, but it's more about living better while you're living.
It absolutely is. I mean, what you just touched on is really one of the core differences between human medicine and veterinary medicine. In human medicine, it is your doctor's job to keep you alive at all costs. No matter what they have to do, their job is to keep you alive because in most medical circles and in most places in the world, conversations of things like humane euthanasia are not okay. They're not okay legally, and frequently they're not okay societally speaking. On the veterinary side, I've never met anybody in veterinary medicine that was interested in keeping patients alive just for the sake of them being alive. For us, it's all about quality of life. I would love to extend your pet's life, but not if the last 5 years of their life is utter misery. Because, I mean, depending on how you look at it, I mean, we have that ability, we have that blessing, if you will, in veterinary medicine to provide our patients with a soft landing rather than to let them suffer. So again, it's all about quality of life.
Well, I never even thought of that, although it's retrospectively pretty obvious, but that's very
Yeah.
cool. Well, tell us about some of the books you've published, and are any of them specifically about cannabis and pets?
Sure. So, my first book, The Ultimate Pet Health Guide, that is a book it's sort of a very, very uh, comprehensive look at integrative medicine and nutrition for pets. Uh, and within that book, there is actually an entire chapter dedicated to cannabis. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how to safely give cannabis to your pets, the Ultimate Pet Health Guide is a great place to look. It's also a book that has very in-depth discussions about integrative approaches to just about any medical disorder you can think of: arthritis, kidney disease, cancer, GI problems, allergies, what have you. It also has a very, very long list of homemade recipes for dogs and cats if you so want to make a fresh whole food diet for your dog or your cat. So there's a lot of information and resources in there. My second and third books, which are Longevity for Dogs and Longevity for Cats, this is a much more specific look at longevity science and how to apply it to our pets. So while there are certainly some references in the longevity books related to the Ultimate Pet Health Guide, Longevity for Dogs and Cats is a shorter read, but it's much more directly focused on what can we do with longevity science to benefit our pets. So those are the books. There's been, beyond that, numerous chapters in other books. My colleague Trina Hazza and I just completed a chapter for a veterinary textbook series called Veterinary Clinics of North America. That's a book that sort of comes out with a yearly update. And we had the opportunity to write a chapter on the current state of medical cannabis research and how veterinarians can incorporate the use of cannabis into their practice. So that has yet to be published, but it is in with the publisher, and they're doing whatever it is that publishers do for it to get published either later this year or early next.
Well, Dr. Gary Richter, DVM, you're often called America's favorite veterinarian, and I can see why. It's been a real pleasure talking with you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.